Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
Abu Hamid Muhammad ibn Muhammad al-Ghazali's magnum opus, The Incoherence of the Philosophers, stands as a monumental work of critical philosophy, a text whose purpose and method are frequently misunderstood. It is an intricate and systematic dismantling of the metaphysical certainties proclaimed by the Hellenized Islamic philosophers, known as the Philosopher, particularly the school of thought heavily influenced by Aristotle and refined by Al-Farabi and Avicenna. This essay provides a direct and rigorous evaluation of the work's internal claims, proceeding through its major arguments to illuminate al-Ghazali's specific critiques and the philosophical framework he employs. The analysis will focus overwhelmingly on the substance of the 20 discussions within the text, assessing the logical coherence and methodological grounds of al-Ghazali's challenge to the prevailing philosophical synthesis. The aim is to reveal the work as a sophisticated exercise in delineating the boundaries of demonstrative reason, a prolegomena to any future metaphysics that wishes to claim the mantle of certainty. It is a work that marshals the very tools of logic and syllogism to expose the inherent limitations of those tools when applied to questions of ultimate reality, divine action, and the cosmos origin. Section 1. The Preface and Methodological Commitments. The preface to The Incoherence of the Philosophers establishes the precise scope and spirit of the inquiry al-Ghazali presents his undertaking as a response to the uncritical admiration for the ancient philosophers, an intellectual fashion he believed led the faithful astray. His stated objective is a systematic refutation of their metaphysical doctrines, accomplished by revealing their internal contradictions and their failure to achieve the standard of demonstrative proof they themselves champion. He is careful to quarantine his critique. He explicitly affirms the validity and utility of the philosopher's contributions to logic, mathematics, and the natural sciences, where these disciplines depend on empirical observation and logical deduction. His target is specific: the 20 metaphysical and theological propositions where the philosopher, in his view, overstep the bounds of reason and trespass into the domain of revelation. He frames his role as that of a detached critic, wielding the philosopher's own Aristotelian logic against them. This methodological commitment is crucial. He intends to show that the philosopher are incoherent on their own terms. Their conclusions regarding God, the world, and the soul lack the apodictic certainty of a properly formed syllogism and instead rely on conjecture, imaginative leaps, and unexamined presuppositions. The preface thus serves as a powerful declaration of intellectual rigor, positioning al-Ghazali as a master of the philosophical arts who turns them inward to police their own frontiers. Section 2. The first discussion on the world's pre-eternity. The first and most extensive discussion attacks the cornerstone of the philosopher's cosmology, the doctrine of the world's eternal existence. Following Avicenna, the philosophers argued that God, as the eternally perfect and unchanging first cause, must have an equally eternal effect, a temporal creation. An act of bringing the world into being at a specific moment in time would imply a change in the divine will from inaction to action. This change would require a cause, leading to an infinite regress or suggesting an imperfection in God. The argument possesses a compelling logical symmetry. Al-Ghazali's counter-argument is a masterclass in philosophical dissection. He begins by demonstrating that the philosopher's conception of divine will is impoverished. They effectively conflate God's will with natural necessity, like the sun's emission of light. Al-Ghazali restores a more robust understanding of will as the power to choose between two similar alternatives. He argues that the divine will is precisely the faculty that can specify a particular moment for creation over any other identical moment, without needing an external determinant. The act of choosing itself is the determinant. He then turns the philosopher's logic of causality back upon them, asking what could possibly differentiate one moment of eternal time from another to explain why the world exists in its current configuration. He shows that both the thesis of a temporal creation and the antithesis of an eternal world lead to paradoxes when analysed through pure reason. For instance, an eternal world implies the completion of an infinite series of celestial rotations, a concept that strains logical coherence. By demonstrating that reason can mount plausible arguments for both positions, he concludes that the question of the world's origin is rationally undecidable. The philosopher's claim of a demonstrative proof for eternity collapses into mere probability, leaving the field open for the authority of revelation to settle the matter. Section 3. The third discussion on divine knowledge of particulars. The inquiry proceeds from the nature of the cosmos to the nature of divine cognition, specifically God's knowledge of individual things. Avicenna's system presented a significant theological challenge. To preserve the impossibility and simplicity of God's essence, he proposed that God knows particulars only in a universal manner. God comprehends the universal forms and the entire causal nexus flowing from his own being. Through this comprehensive knowledge of causes, God knows every effect, but he lacks direct, temporary updated knowledge of the particular, contingent events in the created world. Direct perception of a changing particular would induce a corresponding change in the knower, which is impossible for the unmoved mover. Al-Ghazali identifies this doctrine as profoundly problematic, both philosophically and religiously. His critique operates on two levels. Theologically, it renders God ignorant of the individual realities of the world, such as the prayers of a specific person at a specific time or the unique life of an individual creature. This creates a remote and abstract deity at odds with the personal, omniscient God of the Quran. Philosophically, al-Ghazali exposes the argument as an ad hoc contrivance designed to save a presupposition, namely the absolute immutability of the divine essence. He argues that the philosopher's framework fails to explain how a universal knowledge can account for the unique temporal sequence of events. For example, knowing the universal eclipse and all its astronomical causes is different from knowing that a specific eclipse is happening now, will end, and has ended. The latter involves a temporal relationship that Avicenna's God cannot possess. Al-Ghazali's critique powerfully illustrates the aporia at the heart of Neoplatonic theology, the tension between a perfect, abstract intellect and an active, all-knowing creator. The philosopher's solution, he argues, sacrifices meaningful omniscience to maintain a pristine but detached divine unity. Section 4. The discussions on the soul and its denial of bodily resurrection. Al-Ghazali dedicates several discussions to the philosophers' theories of the human soul, culminating in his refutation of their denial of the physical resurrection. The philosopher, following their Greek predecessors, posited a dualistic anthropology. The human essence is the rational soul, an immaterial substance, whose ultimate destiny and felicity lie in its separation from the corruptible body and its intellectual contemplation of the divine. From this perspective, the idea of resurrecting the physical body, reassembling its decayed parts, and subjecting it once more to the limitations of matter seemed philosophically absurd and soteriologically undesirable. The soul's perfection is achieved through its escape from the body. Al-Ghazali's evaluation of this position is a powerful defense of divine omnipotence against the constraints of philosophical naturalism. His argument is elegantly simple. He concedes that the reanimation of a decomposed body appears to violate the observed regularities of nature. His central point, however, is that the philosophers err in using the observed order of the immanent world as a measure for the power of the transcendent creator. If God possessed the power to create a human body from dust and water, in the first instance, an act itself miraculous from a purely materialist viewpoint, then God certainly possesses the power to collect those same elements and reconstitute them a second time. The philosopher's denial is a failure of imagination, a limitation of their reasoning to the familiar chain of generation and corruption. By asserting the absolute power of God to act outside the established custom of nature, al-Ghazali recasts the question. It is a matter of what is possible for God, a domain where philosophical speculation based on natural laws has no jurisdiction. This argument forms one of the three claims he ultimately condemns as outright unbelief, as it directly impinges upon a core tenet of Islamic eschatology and substitutes a philosophical soteriology for a revealed one. Section 5, the 17th discussion on causality and miracles. Perhaps the most philosophically enduring section of the Incoherence is the 17th discussion, which directly assaults the concept of necessary causal connection. The philosophers held that causes inherently and necessarily produce their effects. Fire, by its very nature, possesses the power to burn cotton. Medicine, by its essence, has the power to heal. This chain of secondary causation forms the intelligible and predictable structure of the universe. Al-Ghazali's critique is twofold, comprising an epistemological and a metaphysical component. Epistemologically, he argues that observation provides evidence only of conjunction, a sequence of events, and never of a necessary connection. We see the flame touch the cotton, and then we see the cotton burn. We infer a causal link, but we never perceive the necessity itself. This link is a product of mental habit, born from repeated observation. God, he maintains, could bring about the burning without the fire, or bring the fire into contact with the cotton without the burning. Metaphysically, this leads to his doctrine of occasionalism. The true and sole efficient cause of every event is God. Created things lack any inherent causal power. Fire does not burn. God creates the event of burning on the occasion of the fire's contact with the cotton. The observed regularity of nature is a custom of God, Sunnat, Allah, a consistent pattern of divine action that allows for an orderly world and the possibility of science. However, God is at every moment free to break this custom, to produce a miracle, such as allowing Abraham to survive the fire. This argument accomplishes several goals. It provides a metaphysical foundation for the possibility of miracles, which the philosophers' deterministic system struggled to accommodate. More profoundly, it asserts God's continuous and absolute power over creation at every instant. The world is being perpetually created and sustained by a direct divine act. This critique of causality is remarkably prescient, anticipating the core of David Hume's analysis of causation by centuries and remaining a touchstone in debates about induction, necessity, and divine action. Section 6, the final condemnation and the demarcation of faith and reason. The 20th and final discussion serves as a powerful conclusion, summarizing the philosophical deviations al-Ghazali deems most severe. He isolates three doctrines of the philosopher as constituting not mere error but unbelief. Cover their assertion of the world's preternity, a claim that God's knowledge is restricted to universals and excludes particulars, and their denial of the bodily resurrection. His selection is strategic. These 3 points represent fundamental clashes between the philosophical worldview and the core tenets of orthodox Islamic belief. The world's eternity challenges the doctrine of gradation ex nihilo and God's absolute freedom. The denial of divine knowledge of particulars undermines the concept of a personal, provident God who answers prayers and judges individual actions. The rejection of bodily resurrection replaces the Quranic vision of the afterlife with a purely intellectual, disembodied existence. By labeling these specific beliefs as irreconcilable with faith, al-Ghazali performs a definitive act of intellectual demarcation. He is drawing a clear line between the legitimate domain of philosophical inquiry, which includes logic and the empirical sciences, and the sacred territory of revealed truth. The philosopher's error in his final analysis was a category mistake. They applied the logic and assumptions suited for understanding a contingent, physical world to the transcendent reality of God and his actions. The incoherence of the philosophers, thus, concludes as a call for intellectual humility, a reminder that human reason, While a powerful gift possesses inherent limits and must ultimately yield to the unambiguous truths provided by divine revelation in matters of ultimate in conclusion, a meticulous evaluation of the internal claims of the incoherence of the philosophers reveals it as a work of profound analytical depth and methodological precision, far from a wholesale rejection of reason. The text is a masterfully executed critique of a specific philosophical tradition on its own rationalist terms. Al-Ghazali's section-by-section dismantling of the philosophers' metaphysical edifice, from their cosmology of an eternal world to their conception of a detached God and an immaterial afterlife, consistently employs a single, powerful strategy exposing where demonstrative proof gives way to probabilistic conjecture and unexamined premises. Its arguments on divine will, omniscience, and causality reveal deep fissures in the Avicennan synthesis, highlighting the inherent tensions between the God of the philosophers and the God of Abrahamic revelation. The work's enduring significance resides in this rigorous policing of the frontiers of human reason. Al-Ghazali's analysis of causality remains a landmark in the history of philosophy, while his overarching project of distinguishing the domain of logic from the domain of faith reshaped the intellectual landscape of the Islamic world. The Incoherence, ultimately, champions a worldview where divine omnipotence is absolute, unconstrained by the necessities of philosophical systems, and where reason serves as a tool to understand the created order, while revelation provides certainty about the Creator.
We really appreciate you tuning in to this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.